But there was like 4 years ago, there was a Time magazine piece about the 2020 election. It was like a real long article about it was something like the title was something like how the shadow government like stole. It wasn't exactly that, but it was like basically went through the real conspiracy of 2020, and they're writing it from the pro conspiracy point of view. But they're forget anything about like ballots or any of that stuff, which I don't. You know, even when you interviewed Trump, he didn't really have a good answer for that. You know, it's like it was stolen, and you're like, well, how do you know it was stolen? It's like it was stolen. You know,
got the information.
Yeah, but what we do know, like the real conspiracy in broad daylight, that they just totally like tanked the economy, overhauled. Yeah, that's it. The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election.
Saved,
and they go deep into like. Admitting so much about like the censorship on social media, the support of the riots and the protests. And what's amazing about it is it really is incredible their ability to turn on and turn off the protest machine.
Well, it's just like, money.
Yeah.
It's just money. There's a lot of people out there that have nothing to do. There are a bunch of, we were talking about it the other day. I was like, if I was 21 years old and someone said, hey, they're going to pay you $400 to go to a Kamala Harris rally, would you go? I'm like, fuck yeah. I'd go. I'd hold that sign up. I'd probably vote for it.
When I was 21, you had me at $400. The conversation was over. It was like $400.
I heard you get $1,000 to go protest for Tesla.
Can I sneak in both of those? Can we do one?
Yeah, $1,400 in a day, dude. Nice.
Yeah, I was thrilled when I was 25 to make like $75 at the comic strip or something like that. So yeah, but also it's it's like, and that's kind of like the whole CIA deep state game is it's always moving around the margins. You know, like if there's because like when I on the show I've talked about a bunch like the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine, and when I'd say like this was a U.S. backed coup against a democratically elected president, the response I'd get from people who disagreed with it would always be like, oh, you're denying the agency of the Ukrainian people? Because like look at these pictures, there's all these Ukrainian people in the streets, and you're like, well, yeah, but the U.S. poured $100 million into that street protest. Like, you think that made a difference a little bit, you know? And so, like, it's not that there weren't real people there.
Sure.
But, man, you want to keep a protest going through the Ukrainian winter, and then all of a sudden you get $100 million, and now you got heat lamps and celebrities and concerts, and then you keep the whole thing going until the democratically elected president has to flee for his fucking life. And then what are you supposed to look at that? Oh, that was just an organic revolution? Like, no, it fucking wasn't. You know, this is DC overthrowing Putin's neighbor. And, you know, they don't like that detail because then it fucks up the whole unprovoked
people
narrative.
Don't like that detail. They don't like the detail that there's many layers of subterfuge exchanging with each other. There's just so much money and so much influence, and they're so good at it. They've been doing it for so long that they can get Time magazine to write an article saying how it's good.
Yeah, it's great.
It's good that we saved the 2020 election.
And by the way, I love I know your podcast with Mike Benz was phenomenal. That dude's great.
He's phenomenal. I've done a few with them now.
Yeah, he's great. But I'll tell you, I knew all that. He's right about all that USAID stuff, and I'll tell you, that was the whole thing. It's Scott Horton's book, Provoked, which is like the best book that's been written on the history of the build up to the war in Ukraine. And it's all in there, dude, if you want. It's all footnoted, but it's like, yeah, they're the ones pumping all this money in. And then they make it out like when you try to cut it, they're like, oh no, we were just helping some kids get on a school bus over here and overthrowing the democratically elected government in Ukraine. You know, like we did all of that.
Well, that's the beautiful thing about USAID. You know, it's like they had the money to do all this stuff. There's the money to do essentially whatever they want all over the world. And the way Mike Benz describes it as the stuff that's too dirty for the CIA.
Yeah. Well, and so they can have plausible deniability too. Because like, what are you talking about?
Non-government organization.
Yeah, there you go. That's totally right. Yeah, exactly. It's like in the name. They might as well call it. They're like, we're not the CIA.
The good guys.
We're just George Soros's NGO, not the CIA at all. Totally removed. But also the thing is that, you know, when you look at like the actual money, because sometimes they'll kind of point out that they're like, oh, this is a very small percentage of the budget. And it's like, yeah.
It's tiny amount of money.
Well, right. It's a small percentage
of $1 billion.
Our budget.
Yeah.
But our budget, I mean, I know the entire GDP of Russia is like $2 trillion. The entire economy. And I don't know what Ukraine is, but smaller than that. And we spend like between $6 and $7 trillion a year, just our government. So when you're talking about flooding in $100 million, flooding in a few billion, I think like it's like $5 or $6 billion since '91 we put into Ukraine. That may not sound like that much money in the context of America, the biggest economy or the second biggest economy in the world. But politically, in a small country like Ukraine, that moves mountains. That changes the entire landscape when the world empire is pumping that type of money in.
What do you think the world looks like, though, if the United States doesn't do that? So if the United States doesn't, this is like the Mike Baker perspective, right? Mm-hmm. Like if the United States doesn't make friends with these dictators, if the United States doesn't put people who are sympathetic to our causes in power, China does, Russia does, it looks very bad for America all over the world. Things get dangerous.
It's almost always the war hawks rely on an unfalsifiable counterfactual. You know, so it's like, oh, but if we didn't do this and we ran the counterfactual, it would be this crazy other scenario that's somehow even worse than this.
Right.
Now, the problem with that, from my perspective, is number one, the factual scenario is like something like 4 to 5 million dead civilians over the last 25 years, entire nations destroyed, $8 trillion depleted from the U.S. Treasury, tens of thousands of our bravest young men blowing their brains out. So, you know, if you're relying on this unfalsifiable counterfactual, but it would have been worse if we hadn't fought a war in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and Libya and Somalia and Yemen and all these places over the last years. Okay. I'd say the onus is on you to really...
Forces are under attack.
have to demonstrate that and not just assert that it would be worse if we hadn't done this. But also, like, we're going broke doing it. Like, we're $36 trillion in debt. We can't even afford it. And the idea that if we were to get out of the game of being the world empire, then, like, China would go, okay, great, now we get to destroy ourselves. And it just seems completely... It seems extremely unlikely that would be the case. And also, it's like people act like, okay, if we weren't doing this in Ukraine, then Vladimir Putin could do whatever he wanted to, or if we weren't doing this, then China could do whatever they wanted to. But they've got adversaries all around them, too, who are richer than them, maybe not in China's case, but certainly in Putin's case, richer than them, are opposed to them. All of Western Europe is not just a pushover. China has Japan and South Korea, and they've got their own, the truth is that nobody has the power that the U.S. government has to do this shit. It's only, like, we're the ones who can do this. And it would just be a better world if we just didn't. Like, you just can't convince me that, like, if we just hadn't have fought the terror wars, like, which was totally a possibility. The whole war on terrorism could have been over by Christmas of 2001 with the special ops taking out the Al-Qaeda cells. They could have trapped Osama bin Laden in Tora Bora when they had him there. They let him escape into Pakistan. Because,
why do you think they did that?
Because they already had their eye on Baghdad. And, if Osama bin Laden is caught, you don't get your bonus war. You know what I mean? He's got the whole war propaganda for invading Afghanistan. It wasn't, everyone remembers WMDs, but it wasn't just that claim. It was the claim, which Dick Cheney and George W. Bush and all the neocons pushed real hard, was that he was in on 9/11. Now, this totally fell apart because it was never true, and they knew it wasn't true. But the claim was he's got these weapons, and he could hand them off to the terrorists, and then... what was the Condoleezza Rice line was like, we don't want the warning to be in the form of a mushroom cloud or something like that.
Yeah.
Like the fear was they're going to nuke Kansas or whatever. As soon as Saddam Hussein gives the weapons he doesn't have to the terrorists he's not friends with. But if they caught Osama bin Laden, I think that would have destroyed the whole 7 wars in 5 years.
It's the Wesley
strategy.
Clark strategy.
Ooh.
Yeah.
You want to hear something else on the Wesley Clark thing? This is new. Piers Morgan, say what you will about him, he hosted a debate between, which I love doing the show, not trashing it, but it's a circus. But
it is a circus.
Yes.
I think he's very smart.
Oh, he's a genius, dude.
That circus is fucking a lot of people lining up.
Dude, he figured out, and you got to give him so much credit because he's probably the only one from like the old guard of corporate media who figured it out. He went, okay, I see where we are.
Yes.
I see what's going on, and I know what people want to see happen.
Tucker figured it out too, but in a different way.
Tucker is actually, yes. Tucker's the one who really figured it out.
Basically doing this kind of a show.
Yes. Yeah. No,
he's basically doing long-form podcast.
Well, look.
But with people who sucked Obama's dick.
Sometimes.
And other various experts.
And other guests.
And other really
only that.
Yeah, really amazing people.
Maybe 10% of the coverage is about who sucked Obama's dick.
Did you see that physician who was on the other day that was talking about all the cancer rises?
Yeah.
They're seeing cancer.
I didn't watch the whole thing, but I saw a few clips from it. It's very interesting.
Crazy. They're seeing pancreatic cancer in kids, little kids, which is just unheard of. He was saying that in all of his career, he had never seen pancreatic cancer in a child before.
Right.
And now they're seeing it.
Well, they used to call type 2 diabetes adult onset diabetes.
Right.
Because it was like, kids don't get it. Right. It's like unheard of.
Right.
And now it's like all over the place.
Right.
I saw that thing. I saw it because you posted it, but the Kaylee Means.
Yes. Wasn't it fucking amazing?
Oh, so great.
Wasn't it fucking amazing? It's just amazing that they're arguing against this.
Well, there's like no argument. And like, I'm far from, I don't really understand the shit that well. But you go, okay, it's crazy that Bobby Kennedy is overhauling this whole thing and cutting all this. And you're like, okay, we spend more on health than any other nation in the world by far.
And we're
the sickest.
Yeah.
You're telling me there should, and your position here, it just like exposes that the entire media, it's like your position here is to get in between the regime and any threat to the regime.
Well, it's also radical change, and radical change causes controversy, and controversy is what they sell.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the media is going to sell that, and they're going to sell it on the angle of this is creating all sorts of problems, all sorts of people are losing their jobs, budgets are getting cut, people are getting fired, they're out on the street. It's that. Like, that's just what they have to do that. That is what, if you're doing television media, newsprint media, subscription media, that's part of your job.
Well, but you could also get huge ratings by covering the controversy that is we spend more money and have the worst outcomes.
Can't do it because you get too much money from the pharmaceutical
that's right.
companies.
But that's
which
the point.
Is also,
Right.
Callie Means pointed that out.
Right, and I mean, look, if the media was just driven by ratings, they'd be doing shows on Jeffrey Epstein every day.
Every day.
I mean, because you'd be the number one show in cable news.
Exactly.
You could go, I'm going to talk about no other topic. Give me the 8 p.m. hour on MSNBC or CNN or Fox News or whatever, and I'll say, I'm just going to make my show about Jeffrey Epstein. That's every single day, that's all we're doing. I guarantee you I'd have number one show in cable news.
Right.
More people would want to watch that.
Candace Owens show. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. And it's doing better numbers than any of the shows on cable news.
It's phenomenal. It's like they created a monster with her when they fired her from the Daily Wire. They created a monster.
Yeah, they sure did.
She can't be stopped.
Yeah. Oh no. There's no stopping Candace Owens at
Because
this
she's
point.
hitting all the fucking third rails that no one wants to touch. She's got a 6-hour presentation on how Bridget Macron is a man. I mean, it's fucking 6 hours plus long.
I don't know if she's even kind of right about that.
I think she's right.
But she's got a lot of shit to say on it.
Bro, she would be getting sued right now instead of trying to bribe her. Instead of trying to give her money to shut the fuck up,
Yeah.
they would sue her.
Yeah. No, you're probably right about that.
I don't know if they are suing her. Have they tried to file anything? They probably have. They probably filed some bullshit lawsuits.
I'm sure she's dealing with several.
I'm pretty sure she's right. I don't know. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
I think she's right. The whole thing stinks. And what stinks way worse than that giant distraction is that the number one opponent for Macron just got sentenced to 4 years in jail and barred from political life for 5 years.
And the front runner, not just the
Yeah,
number
the
one
front
opponent,
runner.
the one who's winning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. It's what they try to do to Trump plus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, they were able to take it further.
Yeah.
And then we'll see if there's the backlash the same way there was when they tried to do that to Trump. And it's just so, it's like there's some propaganda that's like almost too, it can't be successful propaganda. Like saying Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction and is in bed with terrorists, that's good propaganda right there. Right. You know, right after 9/11, you could totally convince the average American that, okay, well, we can't let that stand. You know, in a post-9/11 world, we can't allow some Arab dictator to have nuclear weapons and he's friends with the terrorists and he's in on 9/11. Okay, but to say the propaganda is democracy is on the ballot while you're trying to arrest your opponent because he's winning in the polls,
Yeah.
like that's just too, like it's too ridiculous. It's too on its
Not only
face.
that, you have to say what you're arresting him for.
Yeah.
And then when people look at it, you're like, wait, Mar-a-Lago's worth how much?
Yeah.
Hold on. 34 what? Bookkeeping errors? They're misdemeanors? Where's the felony? There's no
And you're
felony?
saying-
Isn't it past the statute of limitations? It is.
And you're
But he's
like,
a
oh,
felon.
and nobody's ever been tried on this charge. This is a novel,
Yeah.
like a charge where it would be a misdemeanor, but you've ramped it up to
Both
a
of them are
felony.
novel.
And there's
The
no
real estate
victim.
thing, too.
And there's no victim involved. The banks
No victim.
themselves are telling you,
Right.
oh, we were happy to do business with Donald Trump. We'd do
And we
business
got
with him
paid.
again. Yeah.
We got our money back. There's no victims at all. And it's what every real estate agent does.
Yeah.
Every real estate salesman, every real estate investor.
Yeah,
they
it's just- right.
overvalue their properties. And your property is essentially only worth what people are willing to pay for it.
Yeah. Look, I mean, it was so obvious that they were just weaponizing the legal system to go after him.
It's so crazy. Like they tried to say Mar-a-Lago was only worth $18 million.
Yeah, the whole
It's like,
thing is-
dude, I would buy it right away. If someone told me you could get Mar-a-Lago for $18 million, I'd call my accountant right now. I'd go, don't lose this. Jump on this.
Dude, we do some banger podcasts
Wire
from Mar-a-Lago.
money. Wire the money. I'm moving to Florida.
You just bring down Austin. You go, everybody.
I'd have
pick
to
up.
have the call with Jamie. He'd be like, fuck.
Yeah. You go. You
We're
thought
moving to Florida, bitch.
you thought you had some uncomfortable summers here.
Do a lot
Get
of
ready.
golfing. A lot of golfing for you. A lot of golfing. I like some parts of Florida. Florida's fun.
Well, I don't think Trump's selling, and I don't think you're getting it for $18 million.
I'd like to live around alligators here. I'm excited. This episode is brought to you by the Farmer's Dog. We all want to do the best for our dogs, but there's a lot of mixed messaging out there, especially around dog food. Take kibble, for example. You don't have to do a lot of digging to learn that kibble is actually ultra processed. They put the words like premium on their bag next to pictures of real ingredients, but food doesn't end up as burnt down pellets without extreme processing. For decades, it was the default dog food, but not anymore. The Farmer's Dog is healthy food made with real meat and vegetables by people who care about what goes into your dog's body. The recipes are developed by board-certified nutritionists to be complete and balanced, and their food is made to the same safety standards as human food. It's lightly cooked to retain vital nutrients, and then it's pre-portioned to suit your dog's needs. So try the Farmer's Dog today and get 50% off your first box of healthy, freshly made food plus free shipping. Just go to thefarmersdog.com/Rogan, tap the banner, or visit this episode's page to learn more. The offer is for new customers only.
Yeah, don't leave your kids unattended, but yeah, sure.
No. Give your kids a gun.
So let me tell you, because I forgot what I was saying. So Piers Morgan hosts a debate between Scott Horton and Wesley Clark.
Oh, interesting.
And so in this debate, one of the most interesting things, Wesley Clark just very casually said this, but it's like breaking news. But he said, so everybody, I assume we played it like a bunch of times on the show before, but Wesley Clark's 4-star general, he was the head of NATO, and he told Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! That he saw in late 2001 what is become known as the 7 wars in 5 years. That the plan from the neocons in the government was that we were going to overthrow all these governments in the region in the next 5 years. Now, this plan obviously didn't end up happening in 5 years, but it's literally, he names 7 countries and there's one to go. And that one, by the way, happens to be the one that Donald Trump is flirting with a war with right now, Iran. All the rest of them have happened.
Israeli news reported today that a strike on Iran is imminent.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yeah. No, we're very clearly moving toward this war, yet another catastrophic war. But so Wesley Clark gets asked about this in the debate, and he goes, it actually goes back much further than that. He goes, I first saw the plans in 1991, and it came from Paul Wolfowitz. Okay, so he goes, Paul Wolfowitz had these plans in 1991, and he took them to Brent Scowcroft, who was George H.W. Bush's national security advisor. So he takes them to them, and according to Wesley Clark, again, my source on this is a 4-star general. He says that Scowcroft went, we'll look at this after the election. 92 is the election year. They lose. Bill Clinton comes in, and he goes, and the plan kind of got killed. And then he said it was revived later in a study paid for by the Israelis. And that this was done, that Richard Pearl was really the one who brought it back to life, and that it was explicitly done because this is what they thought was necessary to protect Israel. And like, as I've mentioned to you before, now I don't know exactly what study he's referring to, but he said that's what he said. But I do know, as I've mentioned before on this, that anybody can go read The Clean Break. You could Google it right now. It's a clean break, a new strategy for securing the realm, which was a letter written by the guy he mentioned, Richard Pearl and David Wormser, to Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996. It was his first year when he came in as prime minister. And the whole thing is basically, the clean break is a break from the peace process, the break from Oslo, because essentially Bill Clinton had gotten Yitzhak Rabin and Arafat to agree to start this 2-state solution process that should be loosely based around 67 borders. You got to finally give these Palestinians a state. You've been occupying them since 1967. You got to finally take your boot off their neck. And the clean break strategy was to go, listen, we got to get away from this whole idea of a Palestinian state and giving them land. And basically the thinking, the Yitzhak Rabin old school thinking on this, loosely speaking, it's a little more complicated, but basically they were like, look, we've been occupying the Palestinians for decades and decades now. The broader Arab world hates us over our treatment of the Palestinians. And so what you got to do is you have to make peace with the Palestinians so that you can get along with all these Arab states around you. That was kind of the thinking. And the clean break strategy was like, no. We're going to reverse that. instead of making peace with the Palestinians so that we get along with the Arab states surrounding us, what we're going to do is we're going to overthrow all of those states. So we never have to make peace with the Palestinians. So we never have to have a two-state solution. What we'll just do is we'll go overthrow all of these governments. Of course, Israel can't go overthrow all of these governments, but the U.S. can. And so after they had these plans in according to Wesley Clark in 91. We know about the clean break memo in 96. But after 9/11, that's when, by a terrible twist of fate and all this shit, the neocons are in power. They're in George W. Bush's, but there is no Brent Scowcroft, there is no H.W., there's nobody with like a little bit of wisdom at the top. It's Dick Cheney at the top, and then his sidekick, George W. Bush. And they go, so now we're going to move to get this.
Do you remember when Dick Cheney was in the bunker and W wasn't?
Yeah.
That's when we knew it was up.
Yeah, that'll tell you something.
We were informed that he was in the bunker, which is so crazy. Like, why would you say where the guy everyone's trying to kill is hiding?
Yeah.
Are you that confident in your bunker? And where's this bunker? What does it look like? Can I get a fucking MTV Cribs tour of this bunker? What's going on with the bunker?
And look, man, and then just and you could see now where there's like so much there's such a rise in people being so fed up with this stuff. But the idea that we're now, I mean, look, just even with this whole Signal Gate shit that just happened. And it's like the real scandal there isn't even. I mean, I do think that Mike Waltz should be fired over this. I mean, it's a crazy screw up, and it's totally embarrassing.
How do you do that? I mean, I don't understand how you do that. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Did you see his interview?
But it is a Signal chat between high-level government officials with classified information that's being discussed about war plans.
They would claim it's not classified, but it was information about an imminent attack that's about to take place.
Seems like that would have to be. How's that not classified?
How is that not?
If that's not
secret?
Classified, somebody else should get fired.
Yeah,
but at the end of the day, you have, I believe there was 18 people in that chat. Is that correct?
Something probably around there. Yeah.
And no one goes over those things before you start addressing this information. If Jamie and I were talking shit about someone and we decided to do it on Signal, like, I would make sure that I didn't accidentally include my mom.
Yeah, right.
or a fucking reporter I know.
Or worse, like
or Trump himself.
Or like your enemy, like the person who hates you the most.
How could you even have that guy in your contact list? Like, what's going on?
And also,
how do you accidentally include someone?
And the chat is, I mean, you can't overstate it. Short of the president of the United States, it's the most senior positions.
How do you not have
CIA director
going over the list before you go live?
It's unbelievable. But I will say that, like, that, and perhaps there's another element. I mean, I don't know. I don't exactly know. I know in Trump's first term, the efforts from his own government to sabotage him were profound.
They were recording him.
Yeah, I mean, they were framing him for being a Russian spy, his own intelligence agencies. And so when you have a conversation like this get leaked to the most anti-Trump, propagandist at the Atlantic, it does raise some questions. Like,
big questions.
Was this done intentionally? Was it not?
Whoopsies.
Yeah, it's and I don't know if you saw, but Waltz he did Laura Ingram's show. Like a couple days after it came out, and I mean his answers were just ridiculous.
What did he say?
It was like, she was like, so was this a staffer who messed up? Was someone? And he goes, no, I take full responsibility. But it was, I'm sure a lot of people have a contact with the wrong number saved in the contact or something like that.
Yeah, but you don't include that.
Yeah, but also
every time I get a new phone, one of the things I do is I go, oh wow, look at all the dead people on my phone.
Right.
I have a lot of dead people on my phone.
It's depressing, yeah.
It's so sad. But I have a lot of friends that I look through my contact list. I'm like, fuck, he's gone. Oh, fuck, he's gone. It's, and I have to make the decision. Do I delete them from my contact list? Generally, I don't. I like to see their names.
Yeah, I know. It's
I have an old message from an old boss of mine. I keep the phone just because it's got the voicemail on it.
Yeah. No, I get that. I mean? Yeah.
It's like, you keep things that you don't need. I have contacts for people that are not just dead, but people that are dead to me. You know what I mean? Like, why do I have them in there?
Sure.
I don't talk to that guy anymore. Like, but you don't add them to a fucking chat list. That doesn't make any sense.
Well, right, and he was claiming like the idea of, which I'm sure has happened to all of us before, where like maybe you're taking down someone's number and you enter it wrong. So like, but that you wouldn't happen to hit the Atlantic journalist guy's number.
No, he had to be in contact with that guy.
Well, he claims he's never been in contact with him. He's never met him. He's never had a conversation.
So how did he include him in the chat?
By the way, then they found pictures of them together at like different events.
Oh,
so he's already
it's like
lying.
an Epstein deal.
Yeah, he's already lying. It's not. But I will say, like that. It's like with a lot of these things. There was like which we've talked about before on the show, but there's the leaked Victoria Nuland phone call where she's deciding who the new government in Ukraine will be.
Right.
Like right around the time.
Yeah.
Okay. And then at one point she's furious at the European Union for not like moving in faster. And she goes, at one point she goes, fuck the European Union. We'll just do it ourselves.
We should play that recording.
Sure.
Because it's so crazy. But people should hear it.
But the point is that the scandal became that she said, fuck the EU. And you're like, no, dude, that's not the scandal here. That's not, they're like, isn't this undiplomatic of her saying, fuck the European Union? Like, that's the least of what's interesting about this.
Isn't it interesting that Congress people swear now?
It's very bizarre.
Everybody's swearing.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, fuck this, calling people retards. It's great.
Well, it's like they lost, they were trying to play that like Donald Trump's like down here and we're the dig, and then that didn't work, so they were like, I guess we'll just try to be like him too now.
Fuck Elon Musk. Yeah. Everybody's excited again. It's interesting. They're adopting podcast language is what it is.
Yes, but it's I don't think it's going to be successful for them because what they're not adopting is the authenticity of it, and it comes off as kind of like it goes, oh, now you're doing this? Like after all these years of pretending you were all formal and everything was about decorum and how Donald Trump was he wasn't presidential enough, and now you're like, oh, so you never really believed any of that shit. It's like them trying to turn on the woke stuff. It's like it just does. It's too long.
Right.
You were so married to this for too long.
You gave up your authenticity for too long.
Yeah.
And it's like a Chris Cuomo type deal.
It's like Chris Cuomo.
Like,
it's Elizabeth Warren drinking the beer, but like not doing it right. Putting like her whole mouth over a bottle of beer.
I want people to get better, right? So if you were a propagandist and you're like, you know what, this is bullshit. But there's examples of those people out there that are legitimate. You know, and then there's also people that realize like, oh, well, that job is over. I can't do that anymore. Now I have to be something different. Let me try to be authentic.
Yes, but people can read that, man. They can tell.
Well,
you're
also never going to fully be authentic. You're always going to hold something back. You're going to say things because you want people to think of you a certain way, rather than, okay, this is uncomfortable, but this is how I think.
Yeah. No, that's right. Oh, but so anyway, just on the Signal thing though, again, like the real scandal here is not that they either intentionally or were just so incompetent that they added this journalist to it and it got leaked. Like the real scandal is like when you look through the chat and that it's like, what are we doing here? We're bombing another country in the Middle East. We're bombing the poorest country in the Middle East.
Yeah,
by the way,
which has been bombed forever.
Oh my God! On behalf of Israel, because they're standing up against this fucking brutal war in Gaza right now, and so we're gonna bomb these guys again. And then you have like, I gotta say, man, like I was disgusted by Tulsi Gabbard's response there. Someone who I've said a lot of nice things about over the years, and who I really supported as being the DNI, but like. Literally, only J.D. Vance is the only one who offers the mildest pushback and goes, like, hey guys, this is kind of a mistake and it's kind of everything against what Donald Trump ran on. And by the way, like, it's like such an insignificant amount of our trade that even goes through this area. It's really Europe's problem, not ours. But I'll go along with it if you guys want to, if you guys say. And then they literally say on the thing, they go, we've tracked the missile guy, as they call him. This is the target they're trying to take out. They go, we've tracked him to his girlfriend's apartment building. And so we'll level the apartment building. And then Tulsi Gabbard's just like, job well done, team. Everybody's cheering it on. There's not like, nobody even has the thought to go like, is there a way we could do this without like murdering an entire apartment building's worth of people here? Is there a way? Man, this is a lot. Like, it's like, did none of you guys even kind of believe in God? Are none of you even scared that maybe God exists and that like, Jesus Christ, what are we doing here? There's none of that. There's not a feeling of that. There's not a sense of like, and I've talked about this before on the show, but we go the whole history of the war in Yemen, going all the way back to Obama's first term. I mean, what we've done to this country, the poorest country in the Middle East, I mean, it was a goddamn genocide that happened in Yemen. I mean, it was the drone bomb campaign from Obama was bad enough, but the Saudi invasion and the blockade and the war on the civilian population, you know, hundreds of thousands of people died, hundreds of thousands of cases of like cholera and these other like very easily preventable and treatable diseases that babies were just dying of because they had a full blockade around the country. The U.S. Navy fucking enforcing the blockade, the U.S. Fucking refueling the Saudi fighter jets and backing them the whole war there. And the idea that we think launching a couple Tomahawks is going to break the Houthis after they went through all that shit, there's no chance. Like, it's not, you're just killing people for no strategic benefit. There's the only thing that would actually, like, we could overthrow the Houthis if we wanted to invade the country. Like, the U.S. military could do that. But like short of that, the idea that
have to do, that's like a big public thing, which is bombing somehow or another, especially drone bombing, sort of like is in the ether.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's almost abstract.
Yeah.
Like you don't, like if we sent a tier 1 team to go take this dude out, that would be front page news. That would be like an act of war. That would be like a thing. We're declaring war on this country. We've invaded their land with actual boots on the ground. It's different. For some weird reason, like you're allowed to use flying robots remote controlled by drone operators who, by the way, have some of the weirdest fucking PTSD rather. These people are all fucked up for a long time because they watch these folks, because they're watching these folks. They know the people around. They get to know. They watch them for days. They see them hug their kids, and then they get that fucking call. And
you don't get any of the and I don't know, I mean, I'm just kind of speculating here, I'm no psychologist.
This episode is brought to you by ZipRecruiter. Sometimes speed is a huge asset, like in the ring or on the field. Being quicker than your opponent could be the difference between winning and losing. In the world of business, it could be the difference between finding or missing out on your next great hire. Luckily, you can speed up the hiring process with ZipRecruiter. Their new Zip Intro feature can help you meet several interested qualified candidates at once, kind of like speed dating. And right now, you can try Zip Intro for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Rogan. Zip Intro works fast to find the people you need. You can literally post your job today and start talking to candidates in back-to-back calls tomorrow. It's that fast. And best of all, this feature does a lot of the legwork for you. It finds you top talent for your role and schedules those calls. All you need to do is pick a time. Enjoy the benefits of speed hiring with Zip Intro only from ZipRecruiter, rated the #1 hiring site based on G2. Try Zip Intro for free at ZipRecruiter.com/Rogan. Again, that's ZipRecruiter.com/Rogan. Zip Intro. Post jobs today, talk to qualified candidates tomorrow.
But there's something, I think, where, like, if you're in the fight, if you're in the action, you know, it like a lot of different, you know, primal things are going to kick up. Like, you're, you know, as all the troops say, and I've talked to a whole lot of them, it's almost unanimous to a man that they always say the thing you're fighting for once you get there is your brother next to you. Like, it's not even, it's like, forget the mission or whatever. It's like, this is your guy right here. And you guys are going in to make sure your buddy doesn't get his leg blown off or whatever. But when you don't have any of that, there aren't bullets whizzing at you. There's not your friend next to you. There's not this, like, sense of, like, I had to do what I had to do. And when you're just watching it on a monitor from a safe distance, I think there's some way that fucks you up on a whole different level.
It's got to. It's got to haunt your dreams. It has to. There's no other way. I mean, you see a man holding his child and swinging her around in his arms, and then you know you're going to blow that man and that kid to smithereens.
Yeah.
And you have to, because the kids are near the dad, and we got to kill that guy.
Yeah, when you got orders, you know, like that's...
and a whole apartment building. Like, what are we talking? Like thousands of people?
But
what are we talking about? To get to this guy?
Well, you know, there's a
mushroom
clip.
clown. Boom.
Yeah. Well, there's a clip that Tim Pool got like a real short interview with Donald Trump during the campaign. Like I think he was the first one, but it wasn't like a long form podcast. Like he was the first podcaster, but they did like 20 minutes or something like that. But he did get this one clip out of Donald Trump on that thing where Donald Trump is eviscerating Joe Biden for bombing the Houthis for the same exact reason, because they were firing on shipping lanes. And Donald Trump's like, what type of idiot is Joe Biden? I mean, these guys, their answer for everything is to drop bombs on it. Pick up a phone. Diplomacy can work here. Like, you don't have to do this. And the fact is that there were, during the ceasefire, which Trump's envoy negotiated, which has fallen apart now, but during the ceasefire, there were no Houthi attacks on the shipping lanes. Like, they stopped them. And then when the ceasefire fell apart, they picked them back up again. Now, feel however you feel about that. I'm just saying, there is a diplomatic solution here, right? Like, they are willing to, like, if there's a ceasefire, they will stop these attacks. But there's not a military solution short of invading the country and having yet another catastrophic war in the Middle East. And it's like, so which one of those do you want to pick? America first crowd? I mean, like, Donald Trump was explicitly elected for this reason, as a repudiation of the foreign policy of the last 30 years. Right. That we're like done with this. Right. We want to put America first. And as you could see, even J.D. Vance and then a little bit Pete Hegseth, their only issue, it's never the innocent people being killed. For a bunch of Christians, it's kind of weird that never comes up. But their issue is, this is us bailing out Europe, because Europe actually relies more on these shipping lanes than the United States does by orders of magnitude. But even that is part of the America First thing that Donald Trump totally ran against. Like, why is it that we have to foot the bill for everybody else's defense? That makes no sense. We're broke. Our country is in bad shape. We need those resources here.
What is the justification for these bombings? What is the public justification?
That the Houthis have attacked a few U.S. Cargo ships, and that there's, that their international trade, they don't have a right to disrupt international trade in this way, which is like, okay, it's true. I mean, the thing that I've seen the most is like that people will go, well, we can't just turn a blind eye to this aggression by the Houthis. But I also do think, and I don't even blame people for this, because it's nobody, in the corporate media or ever talked about any of this stuff, or very rarely talked about it, never really told the story. That it's like, yeah, if you're just coming into the story now, I could see where you might think the Houthis are the aggressors. But if you're rewinding the tape from this, right, there is just no debate about it. I mean, there's no question that we literally started, it was in 2009 when Obama started up with the drone bombing, the then secret drone bombing campaign, and Yemen was one of the major theaters. This was where, if you remember, because it was like the biggest scandal of the Obama administration, also not talked about much in the media, but was talked about on a lot of podcasts, was that Anwar al-Awlaki and his 14 or 15-year-old son, his two American citizens, were both killed by drone bombs in Yemen. And this caused a bit of an outrage among some people, because you were like, hey, you really can't murder American citizens who have never been charged of a crime. You can't just say, I just, forget that whole Bill of Rights thing. They're on my list. And by the way, the kid was not Al-Qaeda affiliated or anything, and they claimed that wasn't intentional, but it sure seemed like it was. But so Obama had a drone, he was fighting at the time. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula had a presence in Yemen. So he's drone bombing these Al-Qaeda sites. I think the estimates were something like 95 to 96% of the people who died were not the targets. So just killing a whole bunch of innocent people. And then, as always happens in these situations, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula just grew stronger and stronger and stronger, because this is, it's insurgent math, like General McChrystal said. You kill a bunch of innocent people, and then, you kill one little girl, and she had 3 brothers and a father and 2 uncles, and they all join up Al-Qaeda now, because, fuck you, they're going to get you back for that shit.
Everyone's radicalized.
Yes. So we're doing this drone bomb campaign over there. It's completely failing, and Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is just getting stronger and stronger. At the same time, Obama kind of bribed off the dictator of Yemen at the time, this guy, Saleh, and he was like, listen, if you let us do our fucking drone bombing campaigns in here, we'll give you a whole bunch of weapons and money. And so he took the deal. And then he used those weapons to go attack this group, the Houthis. And then he also started losing to them. Even with the U.S. weapons, the Houthis were fucking him up. And then, little by little, the Houthis kind of took over the whole country. And then, now, the Houthis are also enemies with Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Like, these are radical Sunnis, Al-Qaeda, versus radical Shiites, the Houthis. So they're fucking enemies, and they're fighting a civil war while all this is going on. And then Saudi Arabia decided to invade in early 2015. And in 2015, and you could look this up if you Google Obama to placate the Saudis. These are literally what the Obama officials told the New York Times. I believe it was the New York Times. They told them that literally this is why. So Obama stabbed the Houthis in the back, took Saudi Arabia's side, took Al-Qaeda's side, started fighting fighting in a civil war against the Houthis, which is, in effect, taking Al-Qaeda's side in that war. And so the Saudis invade the country. Now, Obama said essentially that because the Saudis are like an important trading partner, and they were pissed off at us at the time. They were very upset about the war in Iraq. The Saudis were the ones in the region who were against it the whole time because they knew. They were like, you're just going to give Baghdad to Iran, basically, and that's their big enemy is Iran. And then they were also really pissed off because Obama did the one decent thing he did in his administration was he worked out that deal with Iran. Same goddamn thing that Trump tore up and is now demanding they get back into some type of nuclear deal. But so, in order to placate the Saudis, Obama goes, okay, we'll back your war here. And like I said, full blockade around the country, refueling their military jets.
Quiet support for Saudis entangles U.S. and Yemen. This is...
Yep.
Here it is. Obama, in an awkward twist, becomes Saudi Arabia's defender. Wow.
And it is hard to overstate how brutal the Saudis were in this war. I mean, think of Gaza, something not too unsimilar to that. But you're talking like a full blockade around the country. This was the poorest country in the Middle East before any of this. Full blockade around the country. The Saudis were bombing. They were bombing their agriculture. They were bombing their wheat silos. They were bombing their irrigation ditches. They're just like a total war on the civilian population, all the way from 2015 into 2021, when it essentially ended in an Afghanistan style, I guess we give up. It was just eventually the Saudis. I think the Houthis, one of the things that's really interesting that happened this whole time, like you were talking about the drone wars. So back in 2009, first of all, it was secret. The drone program wasn't, everyone knew it. There had been good reporting on it. But the way they got the good reporting was people found the drones in Yemen. And they'd take little, grainy cell phone pictures and be like, look, this is a U.S. drone. So there's clearly, but actually the Obama's press secretary, it's not, God damn it, not Jay Carney, his first press secretary. I'm blanking on his name. But he admitted this on NBC News. It was a really amazing. But he was talking about how the drone program. This is years later, 2012. He's at NBC News now, and he was talking about how when he used to get questions about the drone program, he wasn't allowed to even acknowledge that it was real. So he would just sit there. Yeah, Robert Gibbs. I apologize. I should have remembered that.
I was told not to even acknowledge the drone program.
There's video of this.
When I went through the process of becoming press secretary, one of the first things they told me was, you're not even to acknowledge the drone program. You're not even to discuss that it exists, said former White House press secretary Robert Gibbs on Up with Chris Hayes Sunday.
So now think about, okay, by the way, there is video of this. It wasn't, I don't know if it's in this article or not, but that was essentially the point. But the thing in the video that's so funny is they all are laughing about it. They're talking about what a funny thing it is. Imagine being in the position where you can't admit that a real thing's real and journalists are asking you questions. And he said, because it is kind of funny in a weird way, but that's you'd think a newsman that wouldn't be the number one thing. Oh, here, yeah, this is it.
I certainly think there are aspects of that program that are and will remain highly sensitive and very secret. But let me give you an example here, Chris. When I went through the process of becoming press secretary, one of the first things they told me was, you're not even to acknowledge the drone program. You're not even to discuss that it exists. And so I would get a question like that, and literally I couldn't tell you what Major asked, because once I figured out it was about the drone program, I realized I'm not supposed to talk about it. But here's what's inherently crazy about that proposition. You're being asked a question based on reporting of a program that exists.
Right.
So you're the official government spokesperson acting as if entire program, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Right, yeah.
I think in many ways, and I think what the president has seen, and I have not talked to him about this, so I want to be careful. This is my opinion. But I think what the president has seen is our denial of the existence of the program when it's obviously happening undermines people's confidence overall in the decisions that their government makes.
That's the major problem with murdering people in the poorest country in the Middle East, you know?
Yeah.
It might undermine people's trust in you, and therefore your ability to murder more people in the poorest country in the Middle East. So just like, by the way, whenever you see anyone over the last, like, say, 8 years on MSNBC or CNN talking about a threat to democracy and the free press and all this, shut the fuck up. You hired that guy. The guy who's sitting there telling you, like, when it comes to the issue, forget whether you're for the war or against the war. It's a secret war. You're not, forget democracy. The people aren't even allowed to have an opinion on this.
Not even as the White House press secretary. You're not even allowed to acknowledge it.
And like, why not? I mean, it's not as if they were like, well, if Al-Qaeda knows that we're coming for them, then something is compromised. It's just like, oh yeah, Obama ran as the peace candidate. He collected a Nobel Peace Prize before he had done anything, and he didn't particularly want to tell people that he had just started this new campaign of just murdering whoever he wanted to for whatever reason he wanted to. And you know, one of the things that's interesting about the technology of it, and I remember people much smarter than me predicting this at the time, I guess I never really appreciated like exactly the timetable of all of it, but it went in 2009, which he's talking about 2009, a few years later there. It went from like, oh, the US has this new technology where we can use drones in war. So all of a sudden now in 2025, you're sitting around and everybody like, this is just part of war now. You know, literally even the Houthis, I mean, they don't have the capabilities we have, but they have drone bombs. And that's part of how they were able to get the Saudis to finally back out, is like they could hit some of their oil fields with their drone bombs, and it was enough of a pain in the ass for the Saudis to be like, all right, like, call it quits. And so they ended that war in 21. But now these Houthis have been in charge of Yemen the whole time since. You know, in the same way that it was like, we fought this whole war to get the Taliban out of Afghanistan. We just lost. Like, they just still run the whole place. And so these guys are still there. They have gone through what was the worst humanitarian crisis in the world from 2015 to 2021. They survived all of that, and they're still there. And now they see the same goddamn thing happening in Gaza. And they're the one, again, I'm not, like, this is their stated thing. I'm not saying, like, they're all great people or something, but they're going, like, no, fuck that. We're standing up for the people in Gaza. And so they were like, as long as all of you guys are supporting Israel, just slaughtering all these people, then we're going to start, you know, like, trying to shut down these shipping lanes, which they don't really have the capacity to do, but they can hit some cargo ships and hit some military ships.
How does this ever settle? How does this ever relax? Like, when you look at what happened in Gaza, and you think about the tensions that existed before October 7th, and then this happens, and then the Israeli attack happens. Like, how does anything come to a peaceful resolution at this point?
Well, it looks really bad at the moment right now, you know? And like what I always like to say, which I, you know, is like 50% just me telling myself something to feel better about the situation, but then 50% like it is kind of, you know, like you could go around the world right now and like England is right next to Ireland, and everybody's just cool there right now. And that would have seemed like impossible, you know? Right. And like France and Germany and, you know what I mean? Like, right. There are all these countries where like there was a time where it just seemed impossible. And you know, that was Egypt and Israel. So Egypt and Israel went to war 4 times in the first 20-something years of the existence of the State of Israel. They just kept going to war and war and war against each other. And then in the late 70s, they made a deal. And it was like a land for peace swap.
But isn't it part of the problem that Palestine is not a state? Like,
that's like the whole problem.
The whole thing. It's like you can never come to peace if you never even acknowledge they exist.
Yeah. They've had, so Israel took control of what are known as the occupied territories. They took control of Gaza and the West Bank in 1967. And it's one thing, like, I'm not like saying it's ever justified, but like, it's one thing to like occupy an area for a few months after a war as you're going through the process of turning it over to the, like to themselves, or it maybe even a few years. But like, we're going into like 60 years of complete Israeli control over these people. And under Israeli control, they have zero rights. Zero rights whatsoever. I mean, like, they don't have the freedom of movement. They don't have freedom to trade with the outside world. They don't have voting rights. They don't have the right of due process. They get, if literally to this day, like in the West Bank, where there's like all these big Israeli settlements, because the Israelis are just constantly slowly stealing more of the Palestinians' land. If like an Israeli settler in the West Bank, in the same jurisdiction, gets in a dispute with a Palestinian there, the Israeli citizen, he's a citizen of Israel, he has rights. He goes to a trial. The Palestinian goes in front of a military trial. If he's lucky enough to get that, they have something like a 99% conviction rate. You're just totally fucked. Like, and then look, a lot of people will point to like there's been terrorism on the Arab side toward the Israelis going back many years, but like, I think you're essentially right. I mean, you can't expect a group of people to just be subjugated for eternity, and nobody's going to try to violently fight back. And of course, when they non-violently try to fight back, that gets squashed too. That gets met with violence.
And then the wildest thing, Trump comes along and says, we're going to take it. We're going to take it. We're going to turn it into the Mediterranean of the Middle East. I really just, and I'll say, listen, I know, like, the last time I was on election night, and I supported Donald Trump in this last election. I think Donald Trump was like a necessary force. Donald Trump is a once-in-a-century type of figure. If that.
Yeah, I mean, there was just nobody was positioned to do the things that Donald Trump did, and there were like enormous positives that came out of him winning this election. I mean, Donald Trump landed a devastating blow on the Republican establishment in 2016 when he won the primary, and he landed a devastating blow against the Democratic establishment by winning the presidency this year. And he, like, destroyed the corporate media, like, in a way that nobody else could have done. And all of those things are, like, incredible achievements, But there is this, like, kind of tragedy with Donald Trump, too, where it's like, he's the one guy who was able to do all of this. And I will say, there were hopes that it was like, hey, he maybe this time around, oh man, he's got Bobby Kennedy there, he's got Tulsi Gabbard there, he's got like
right.
This is like a whole different thing.
I'm gonna stop that war in one day.
Yes, right. He's here to end the wars. Also, like, he had been burned by the system now. Yeah. In a whole, it's not just that they called him a Russian traitor or whatever. It's like they tried to throw him in jail. Tried to murder him? Okay, this is maybe. Did. Oh yeah, no. I'm sorry.
Somebody
that was totally.
He had 5 phones.
A lot of times, as we all know,
professionally scrubbed department.
Yes, that happens all the time, Joe. Many times, presidential candidates, the front runner to be president, once again, former presidents, a sniper gets a clean shot 130 yards away from them. That's especially a very common thing.
A guy who was in a BlackRock commercial just a couple of years ago.
And a lot of those guys were in BlackRock commercials once, Joe. These are normal things that happen to normal people. It's part of everyday politics. But so a lot of this made people think like, oh, maybe. But I will say, already into Trump's presidency, it's just a lot it's like, shit. No, I guess I got to be happy with the things that he did, but the idea that he's really figured this out, or he's really on to something, or he's learned a lot, or the guy is out there, he's saying we should primary Thomas Massie and throwing his support behind Lindsey Graham. I mean, come on.
What is Thomas Massie doing that's pissing him off?
No, he didn't vote for the freaking spending bill. He voted against the CR because it increased spending and was increasing the debt, and it was refunding all of the programs that Doge had recommended be cut. So he was like, no, I'm not voting for this. And Trump was like, well, I'm going to need you to vote for it. And he was like, no. And that's it. That's his crime. The same thing, same reason Trump hated him in 2020, because he wouldn't vote for the $2 trillion COVID spending bill. Because he was like, what, you're telling me because the country's locked down, that means we have to bail out every giant corporation around the country? Like, no, I'm not supporting this. And then Trump sent all his people to go, he's betraying America first or whatever. And there's once Trump gets in it, he just wants, like, the next win. But, the real problem here is, like, the idea that we are going to go and ethnically cleanse, like finish the job of ethnically cleansing the Palestinians out of Gaza on behalf of Israel. It's like, what? First of all, what do you think the reaction to that's going to be? What do you think that's going to do to our country here? You know, it's like I feel it's like I see a lot of people who get very upset about what they call the rise of anti-Semitism, which certainly, you know, according to my Twitter feed, is real.
It's real.
There's a lot of people.
Do you think is it a rise, or is it the ability to express it now been unlocked? Or is it both?
I don't know. Maybe both. You know, I have a tough time kind of figuring out exactly what it is. It's also there's a troll aspect to it. You know, there's when you make one thing the thing that you're not allowed to say, and the thing that's gonna get a rise out of everybody. This has been true, and it's been building for many years. Kind of the alt-right back in the day was kind of the first, you know, version of this, but where you could be some guy just on your computer. You could be a 15-year-old on your phone or whatever, and you could get, you know, the New York Times senior editor to be like, oh, look at this outrage, you know, and just the ability to provoke that reaction out of somebody that's fun.
Shit first.
Yes, that's fun. And for you're handing this person who has no power like some real kind of power.
Right.
I also think that young men today, particularly like young straight white men, I think it's kind of hard, like for me and you, to even understand the world they grew up in. It's very different than the world we grew up. Like, they grew up in this woke era. And okay, now it's kind of like that's receded and wokeism has been defeated, but they grew up in a time where racialism was accepted by every powerful institution, just against them.
Right.
You know, like, it was totally fine to demonize straight white men at your high school, at your college, in your movies, in your TV shows, your politicians, celebrities, everybody was just, and that does, like, it unlocks a certain thing that we kind of all had a gentleman's agreement to not unlock. Like, we're just not really going to do that. You know, we don't want to be like racialists. And so I think that's a component to it too. But there's also no question that it's exploded since Israel's launched this war on Gaza.
Yeah, and it's exploded on the left, which you never heard anti-Jewish sentiment in public spaces before. You really never saw that on campuses. You know, if Israel did something, you may see a protest, but it was generally it was organic. These don't seem organic. They seem very funded, and they're very disruptive. And, you know, some universities experience vandalism and fires and crazy shit and people being threatened and doxxed. You know, it's different. It's a different level of it than I think we've ever seen before, and it's created a giant divide on the left, right? Because on the left you have a lot of people that are their whole life they've been in support of Israel, right? And now all of a sudden there's these Free Palestine people that are also on the left. So you have this divide on the left.
Yeah, you know? and there was that divide. Goes back a lot. Like, there were leftist divides over the Israel-Palestine question going back really to like 1967, where most of the kind of like the Black Power movement people, like the Black Panthers, the Nation of Islam, those guys, they all sided with the Palestinians because they all saw it as like an extension of like, yeah, that's the whole, you know, we're against this kind of like racist colonizing, you know, like force. And then, of course, there were a lot of influential Jewish people on the left who were like, no, not in this case, we're okay with it. But you guys sure are right about all that civil rights stuff. But like, no, let's not look at it. Let's not look over there. But so a lot of that has kind of reemerged. Now, I do also, you know, I don't know. Like, I talked to one kid who was like a grad student at Columbia, which was really like the center of so many of these protests, and he's Jewish. And I was like, so what's it like there? And he was like, they're annoying and they're Latin. Like, some of their chants are like real kind of weird. Yeah, I don't really know what they mean by it. And I was like, well, do you ever feel like threatened? And it's like, no, it's not. Like, it's fine. They'll just chant as you walk by. And then I do know also that they had at least one time they had like a Seder service because they got like Jewish people in those protest movements too. And so they, over last Passover, it was a year ago, they had like a Seder service with the Jews like in there too. So I don't know like what percentage of them are like just against the war and seeing pictures of dead babies and stuff like that. What percentage of them are actually, you know, like harbor resentment toward Jewish people? Like it's kind of hard to measure. But I would just say that like it almost in a very similar way to like what I was talking about with the drone war against Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. It just made them stronger. You know, it's like, hey, if you want to see less Al-Qaeda, maybe stop having the American military kill innocent civilians in their land, because that seems to be fueling them. And at the same time, for the people who are so concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism, you're like, okay, well, it has exploded since Israel's been doing this to Gaza, right? So like maybe the U.S. shouldn't be funding and arming the whole goddamn conflict, because that does seem to like at least give those people a giant talking point to latch onto. Maybe we shouldn't have a system where like our political class is not allowed to criticize a foreign government, and a foreign government that's gotten us into like 7 wars, or at least played a large role in getting us into those wars explicitly. I'm not like alleging some secret conspiracy. Yeah. I'm saying like Benjamin Netanyahu is John McCain.
Right.
Like he's been telling us Iran has a nuke. He's been telling us they're 5 years away from a nuke since I was 7. Literally, he's been saying Iran is 5 years away from a nuke the entire time. And he came over here, he testified before Congress in 2002 that we, as a regional expert, that if we were to overthrow Saddam Hussein, democracy would sweep the region and there'd be all these positive reverberations. And then he goes, and you also got to overthrow the regime in Iran, and you also got to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. And like every single one of these things, not Iran yet, still pushing for that, but we went and overthrew Saddam Hussein. We went and overthrew Muammar Gaddafi. And I don't know what swept the region, but it wasn't democracy.
No, I remember in the early 2000s when I realized there's 2 fighting factions of Islam. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And that Saddam Hussein had actually kept that from boiling over.
Yeah.
Because he was in control.
Yeah. No, I remember learning it too, right around the same time.
You're like, wait a minute.
You're telling me there are shirts and skins over there?
They fight against each other? Like, what do they... Do you know the difference between Sunni and Shia?
I mean, I know that they're different sects of Islam, but like in terms of like the religion itself,
is it like the Catholics versus the Protestants?
Yeah, I think it's something like that. Like it's always the people with the like most minor interpretations of their holy book differences who like go to war the most aggressively.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like it's like
the
Catholics and the Protestants, or you know, like
fucking
you agree
crazy.
on 95% of this religion, but like whatever.
If you didn't know about that conflict, you would never believe it's real. Like Christians going to war with other Christians, like different sects. Like brutal, horrible wars.
Especially when you could like read about Jesus and you'd be like, this doesn't seem to be what he's saying at all, man.
Yeah,
like,
who's at the helm of this fucking battleship?
It's unbelievable to me that and I'm not claiming to be any type of religious expert, and I'm not a Christian, but it is unbelievable to me that anybody could be a Christian and could then like somehow do the mental gymnastics and rationalization to be like, and that's why you got to support every war. That's why we got to fight every single one of these wars. Because, you know, just like that guy Jesus told us, slaughter women and babies. You're like, seems like the opposite of his message from my humble understanding of it.
So the argument of that, if you want to take the argument, would be like, you have to do that to protect everyone here.
Yeah, I mean,
that's the argument, right?
Like we have to go to war with Iran, a country that doesn't have nuclear weapons or an air force capable of delivering them here.
And it's so convenient that they're evil. So convenient that they torture students and they execute Olympic gold medalists in wrestling because they protested against the government. It's so convenient.
Well, it's also like, you know, there's evil shit going on all over the world.
Oh,
and it's terrible that there is. But isn't it interesting how like the next war, you know, like I did a debate at Princeton University a few months back against Josh Hammer, who's an editor at Newsweek. And we did like an Oxford-style debate on whether the U.S. should support Israel. And you know, one of the things he said to me, so I was talking about like all this stuff, like the clean break strategy and the 7 countries in 5 years. And he was like, oh, the war in Libya, that was a totally separate thing. Like that was like a liberal interventionist war. And I was like, well, it sure is a coincidence that it was one of the 7 countries. You know what I mean? Like, what a wild coincidence.
Kind of crazy.
That the government we decided to overthrow was the exact government that 4-star General Wesley Clark told me we were planning on overthrowing way before any of these claims about how Gaddafi... all these
Libya
bullshit
one
claims.
is wild.
Yeah.
The Libya one's wild when you see how good of a leader he was. Obviously an evil dictator. No question.
An eccentric fellow.
Yeah. Definitely a piece of shit. However, for the people that lived there, they got no interest loans. They had incredible infrastructure. Their economy's doing well. They were at peace.
I think it was one of the richest countries in Africa, which is, grading on a curve, but
then,
still.
a few years later, after we we helped people, we assisted, it becomes a failed state, and they have slave auctions on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I've heard it's recovered somewhat. People reach out from Libya and tell me that Tripoli is actually not bad
is
now.
doing better than it was. But also, and the other part of this is that this was a huge contributing factor to the migrant crisis in Europe. Like all these things do have like these domino effects.
Right.
So then Gaddafi also was kind of like not allowing that to happen. Mm-hmm. And then you had these huge numbers of refugees pouring into Europe.
But
then
not
you see
just
the rise
pouring in, but it seems like they're wanting them to pour in.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really strange. I had a conversation with someone about this that didn't understand it, and we were going over civil unrest and the use of civil unrest. One of the things that civil unrest does do really well is it makes people want to have measures to stop civil unrest that ultimately erode liberties.
Yep.
It's a really good strategy. So if you want to take away people's guns, take away right to protest, one of the best things to do is to release as many criminals as you can and flood your city with violence and crime. The more violence and crime you have, the more people will be freaked out. The more people will be freaked out, the more likely they are to give in to new measures of control.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you can do that worldwide.
Well, you can watch it.
But also, let's talk about Europe, okay, in particular. Let's talk about Germany. Let's just talk about the UK. What have they been doing besides letting in immense numbers of migrants? One thing they've been doing is arresting people for Facebook posts. They're arresting people for stepping out of line. So they're moving closer and closer to totalitarianism. And if you look at the numbers of people, that have been arrested for just Facebook. One of them was someone just got arrested, pulled out of his house at 2 o'clock in the morning for a Facebook post saying that he didn't like the Palestinian flag. This is wild stuff. It's wild stuff, and thousands of arrests. Not just. Have you ever seen Konstantin Kisin talking to someone about this? And he was explaining. Yeah, he was explaining like Russia imprisoned 400 people for posts on social media. That's crazy, right? How many do you think the UK did? And he's like, I have no idea. It's like 4,000. He's like, what?
Yeah.
Thousands of people are getting arrested in the UK, and you're only seeing some of them. You're seeing the people that are filming it at the time, who have the wherewithal to grab a cell phone. There's a lot of people that have just been by themselves that just got scooped up.
What was it? I think it was 60 Minutes did a piece where they had like 3 lawyers. They were sitting there and were kind of like asking them like, so would this post be okay? Would this be okay? Could I say something? And they're like, well, posting it is actually much worse than just saying it. And it is really creepy.
It's really creepy.
But you're so right. You're so spot on about this kind of like this like 1-2 punch of like destabilization and then government coming in with the solution.
Yeah.
It's Harry Brown, who was he's deceased now, but he's a brilliant guy. He was he ran for president on the Libertarian Party in '96 and 2000. But he used to say the government breaks your leg and then offers you a crutch. And then, they convince you to be thankful for the crutch. And you're like, man, if this government wasn't here, I wouldn't have a crutch. I'd be walking around on broken legs. But you see it where, look, even if you just watch, I remember, during 2020, when the George Floyd thing first happened, and forget, whatever the autopsy, there was the one autopsy that said it was fentanyl that killed him, leaving all of that aside. Just when the video of that Derek Chauvin kneeling on this guy's neck, who's on the ground and crying in pain, and he's kind of smiling, and then the guy dies. everybody I know. I mean, it was so unified. I knew hardcore right-wingers, you know.
Yeah.
My Fox News watching father-in-law. I remember I was at his house the day it happened, and he goes, every one of those cops should be put in handcuffs on national television. And he goes, they should all be charged with murder. Like, there was, you know, that was like, you cannot do this. And then, after the riots started in the summer, all those same people were like, send in the military. You know what? Like you just see how like someone could so quickly go from like, you know, we really need some police reform here. Like there is too much state power of policing. So then after you see some riots, what are you asking for? Well, who's going to stop that?
Martial law?
Yeah. We need the government to come in and crack down. More police power than ever before. So you could see like, and that's just like a little scale, but you could see how much that demand and sometimes very understandably so. Like in that example, very understandably so, because you're like, well, I don't know. Like, I'm totally against, like, the over-militarization of the police, but when you have these huge riots across every major city in the country, you're like, well, I guess this is the one time we have a reason to have that. And then, by the way, of course, they don't do anything to stop it.
Yeah.
They just let it go.
The George Floyd one was fascinating because it wasn't a setup. It was just an organic moment where someone was filming some guy who had a guy lean. Now, was he on his neck or was he on his shoulder? Because I keep hearing people online saying he was on his shoulder.
Maybe that might be right.
The thing is, on the neck, you're really going to go out. You're going to go to sleep. You know, if the guy's really pressuring your neck like that, you're going to, like, anybody who thinks that's not a big deal, get someone who knows how to put weight on the knee, leaning on your neck. Okay, he's right on the neck, no question at all. Okay, that will put you to sleep for the most part, and that will definitely constrict your breathing, depending upon how much weight he actually has on that neck and how strong George Floyd is. Now imagine this guy's already fucked up. He already has an enlarged heart. He's on fentanyl. He's already fucked up. But would he have died without this happening?
Well, from what I understand, there were two autopsies.
People want to say it was an overdose. Well, it's certainly he had poor health because of drug abuse, and it certainly must have contributed to it. But are you saying that if that wouldn't have a giant effect on someone in poor health? Like if you did that to an old man with emphysema, if you had some guy who's been smoking cigarettes for 50 years and you got on his neck, he could fucking die right there. Whereas if you didn't get on his neck, he'd probably live a long time.
Right, and you can't say it was the smoking that killed him if it was that.
Right. Remember Eric Gardner was another one. Yeah, Eric Gardner, people were saying, he died because he's fat and he had a heart attack. I was like, no, dude, that guy's choking him. Yeah. And if you don't think that guy's choking him, let me grab your neck like that. You don't think that's a choke?
Yeah.
Because it's one arm? I'll put you to sleep with one arm.
Yeah.
You can put someone to sleep.
I've watched UFC fighters get put to sleep. Professional fighters get put to sleep with one arm.
Professional world champion Sean Brady choked out Leon Edwards for the most part with a one-arm guillotine.
And Luke Rockhold got Mike Bisping the same way.
One-arm guillotine. Yeah.
Bisping
Tito Ortiz got somebody with that. The one-arm guillotine is legit. That's legit.
And anybody who's like... If anybody who knows what they're doing, it was grappling anyone who doesn't know what they're doing, they could all one arm choke you out.
Yeah, they were saying, oh, he just restrained him. Like, no. When you restrain someone, you get their arms behind their back, you pin their weight down. You could just restrain the guy if you're a good jiu-jitsu practitioner with your body weight. If you have you're on top. He's face down. You put your hooks in. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
You flatten him out. You underhook him. You pull his arms out. Someone cuffs him. You don't choke him. You don't have to choke him. The guy wasn't resisting at all. So that was another one, right? But these are real moments. These are organic moments. They're not setups, but boy, are they good at capitalizing on those fucking things. And then when you see public officials going with this swarm of narrative, the swarm of narrative was defund the police. Like, are you guys out of your fucking mind? In the middle of these riots, you're going to go against the police instead of going against the rioters? You got one bad cop. That bad cop should be prosecuted, or something should happen. He should be, if the guy died of an overdose, at the very least, what he's doing seems to be brutal.
Yeah.
And unnecessary.
Yeah,
unnecessary and brutal. The guy's not resisting. You put your weight on his back. It's hard enough. It's so hard to get up if someone has their fucking knee on your back. It's so hard to get, especially if you're out of shape and you have an enlarged heart and you're on fentanyl.
No, there's also 7 cops around him. And he wasn't, I've watched the whole body cam footage. He was he was clearly fucked up, and he was clearly having like a massive panic attack.
Yeah.
But he wasn't like being like violent with the cops. He wasn't a threat for that many cops.
The cops get so desensitized, and you have so many experiences with one individual. This guy had a long criminal record. The people that worked that area probably all knew him. Didn't Derek Chauvin and him work together somewhere?
Yeah, I remember hearing that, but
security
I don't know what they did. Yeah, they
somewhere.
were they were doing some security
so
gigs together. I think so.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so there's probably some get back involved in that knee on the neck.
It's right, quite possibly. It's also one of those things where like it is. Look, most of the time someone won't die if you do that.
They
you know what I mean?
do that all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But there is
most of the time someone's not filming it.
Yes,
that's
also true.
That's
and if the body cam footage comes out, it's usually much later, so it's not kind of like as immediate of a thing. Also, usually every single media outlet in the entire United States of America, in the middle of a lockdown, doesn't play the video on repeat all day, every single day, because there was no reason. The thing about George Floyd that was crazy is that there was no reason for it to be a national story, and there was no reason for it to be a racial story. Like there wasn't.
Wait a minute, really? Why don't you think there would be no reason for it to be a national story when a cop kills?
Oh, well, I just
mean
mean
for a false $20 bill.
No. When I say that, okay, I'm not saying there's no like story there. I'm saying we're a country of 330 million people. There are a number of these incidents that happen every year. Not like a crazy high number, but like there's a few hundred of these every year. This one kind of seemed to get picked as like we're all gonna run with this right now
because we got the full video. We got a 4 minute. It's like go back to Rodney King. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, that is a fair point. The Rodney King one was a bit different. I mean, number one, the video element then was way crazier because it was
nobody had ever seen a video.
No one. There's a guy with a giant thing who happens to be on his balcony at the right time, and also they beat the ever loving shit out of him. Like it was. Yeah, I mean, they were just after he was down and taken, they just kept going and kept going. But the other thing that I always thought was like, you kind of the George Floyd thing. It's not like there was like any element in there where like they were calling him the N-word or there was some type of like racial like thing. Like it didn't ever seem to me that there was any reason to believe that like had he been a giant white dude tweaking out on drugs doing the exact same thing, it wouldn't have gone the exact same way.
Right, so, but he wasn't.
Yeah,
the thing is, it is post Rodney King. It is a white guy on the neck of a black guy.
But there was also a Asian cop and a black cop, and
but they weren't doing the kneeling, and they also got prosecuted.
That's a fair point. That is a fair point.
Didn't they get prosecuted?
He got convicted of murder. I not
think
remember.
The Asian cop got prosecuted as well. See what other cops got prosecuted. I think it's one of those things where you're just supposed to step in and say you got to get off his back.
I think that's totally reasonable. I mean, that's to be like, hey, listen, he is totally.
The thing is, like, I want to know, was he on his neck the whole time? Because I had heard that he was on his shoulder, but that is on his neck. So
well,
I'd have to go watch that horrible video over again, and I don't want to do that. It's dark. Today I was watching some horrible videos today from Gaza. This guy carrying around a headless baby, showing what happened to his child. It's just so fucked. Another guy was holding a child's arm in his hand.
Dude, it is so.
It's so
fucked. The level of evil that this shit is. I mean, you see, I know you've seen the drone videos, like the aerial footage of Gaza. Gaza's gone.
It's gone.
They fucking destroyed the whole goddamn place. I saw one.
It's hard to believe.
I saw one estimate said that it was 90% of the population has been what's the word I'm looking for? That they've been
displaced.
Displaced, yeah. That they've 90% of them are
Who's
out of
the
nowhere.
10%
Yeah, I know. It's
still there.
I'm good.
Find that guy and train him. That's your really. Rambo.
But it is.
What is this, Jamie?
3 of the cops were found guilty of violating his rights, and one other one got pled guilty to aiding and abetting second-degree murder or manslaughter.
Yeah, that was the Asian guy.
He got 3.5 years.
Jesus.
All right.
Aiding and abetting. Yeah.
I think you kind of have. You're a cop. You kind of have a responsibility to stop that.
And then there's also the level of fentanyl. We've discussed this, right? Because people keep saying that he died of a fentanyl overdose, but I don't believe the level of fentanyl in his body was enough to give him an overdose. For the how LD50 rates work? You know how that works?
No, I
Lethal dose for 50% of the population. That's how they determine whether or not.
Okay.
So the problem is, you get 100 people, give them all the same amount of stuff. 50 of them are going to die. 50 of them are going to live. So that's how you find what the LD50 of a drug is. So when you have something like fentanyl, this is a guy's like an inveterate fentanyl user. He probably has a very high tolerance to opiates. And I don't.
And he's huge. He's a big dude.
He's a big dude. Yeah. But he was obviously dying from drug abuse. He had an enlarged heart. He was fucked up. And the levels though, when they were like at the threshold.
Not the official autopsy, but this is the doctor that did one of them, I think, and he said here. I don't know if you can read that, but
yeah, fentanyl at 11 nanograms per deciliter. This is higher than chronic pain patient. If he were found dead at home alone and no other apparent causes, this could be accepted. Call on overdose. Deaths have been certified. I don't know what that says. Level of 3. So level of 3. He was at 11. So deaths have been certified at a level of 3 nanograms per deciliter. He was at 11 nanograms per deciliter. I am not saying this killed him. Fentanyl metabolite 4 AMPP. I think this is non-commercial. Meth 19. Oh, he had meth too. 19 nanograms per deciliter. This is relatively low. But meth's bad for your heart. From video I've seen, it appears like his knee is on the side of the neck, not where the structures are. That doesn't mean anything. That's silly. That's a person who's never been choked. You shut your mouth. Shut your mouth, doctor. Let me lean on your neck, bitch. Breathe deep.
Yeah, right.
What are you talking about? That's
right.
so crazy. That's not going to crush his windpipe?
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
No, that just seems ridiculous.
That's so stupid. He crushes everything. If I got on your neck here, you're not doing nothing. There's none of this is going to work. Look, when you have a big neck, you can die from your tongue. You know that? People die of sleep apnea, like football players.
Like
big
they
old
swallow
thick
their tongue?
No, their tongue closes over the back of their mouth because they have so much neck tissue that their air hold gets smaller. Right now, I want you to imagine someone compressing that neck tissue with 210 pounds of body weight, all positioned on their knee.
Yeah,
bro, you can put someone to sleep that way.
Yeah,
they'll die if you hold on to it. They'll die.
It's indefensible. And
it's crazy.
And and I think the country had kind of like the appropriate reaction to it.
But then they're trying to say that cops can't use chokeholds anymore. Well, that's crazy too. Because you should be able to. If you're a cop, you got to be able to choke people. Like if you get some wild, methed up fucking dude and he's attacking cops and he's got his shirt off and fucking swastikas on his chest and you want to strangle that guy.
Sure.
Put him away. Put him asleep. Then you can cuff him. You can do that. Go to sleep.
In fact, it might be.
It's the safest
It might be
thing
the
for
much
him.
safer way than like tasing someone and then where they stiffen up and just fall over.
If he just choked George Floyd out and then cuffed him, that would be way better for everybody.
Yep.
Like a real simple 5-second rear naked choke. He goes to sleep temporarily. You cuff him. He wakes up. None of the trauma to his neck. None of that shit. None of the 4 minutes. Whatever it was, seconds.
No nationwide riots.
It's
maybe
real
they would have been for a different reason.
It's just a jiu-jitsu move, and then you cuff them, and But man, being a cop is the most fucking thankless, psychotic job in this country. And every day they pull up to cars and they worry that they're going to get shot. Everybody's seen videos of cops. They pull up to fucking tinted windows and they get blasted.
I just saw one today.
There's so many of them.
And it was great. The one I saw today too was one where like there was almost no tell. Like it was they had to stop and they were just like, hey, buddy, is this your car? And he's like, yeah, it's my car. And he seemed totally cool. And they're just like, okay, license and registration. He goes, I actually don't have my license on me. And he goes, you're driving without a license? All right, sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to step out. And then just comes out, boom, 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 shooting at him and shoots one of the cops. The other one gets behind the car, starts shooting back. Yeah. It's like, listen, I get that's got to be a crazy thing to. It's like I remember hearing a baseball player say once that he was like he goes, the toughest thing about being like in the outfield is that like if you think about the game, like every single pitch you got to immediately like be like, oh, is it coming to me?
Right.
And then it's just like not is, you know, and like you got to like be ready for that one time where like it is coming to you. And I'd imagine there's something like that with the cops.
Times
it's like
a million.
Every routine traffic stop, you got to be a little bit concerned about that. On the other hand, that is the job, and there are expectations when you're, you know, if your salary is paid by the people's taxes, and like the standard has to be probably the same thing I think the standard for fighting wars should be. The standard should just always be, do you absolutely have to do this? You know, like if you don't have to,
like the Eric Gardner situation.
Yes, like do you have to do this?
He's selling.
Okay,
loose
he's selling
cigarettes.
loosies. Okay, there's got to be stuff. I understand.
Tell him
like,
not to do that.
Right.
It's
and I understand. Like maybe there's like human beings can get very creative, man. We could find. I understand you're saying. Okay, there's the guy inside the store has to, you know, sell cigarettes with the tax on them. He gets to sell these loosey cigarettes. It's hurting this guy's business, and maybe he's asked him to leave and he hasn't. We're talking about selling loose cigarettes outside of a store. You just don't need to bring this level of violence, you know, for this situation. And you know, it's one of the things like I know I saw you were talking about the other day with the Trump deportation stuff, where there's like this it's an interesting moment that we're in right now, because you have, if you remember in Trump's first term, this was one of the biggest kind of like controversies that he lost a lot of public support over, was the kids in cages thing. And okay, now they, you know,
turns out they'd always put kids in cages.
Yes, they were built under the Obama administration. It was kind of bullshit. They took some pictures of a kid crying that wasn't even really about the Trump deportations. Like, you know, the media lies. That's what they do. But there is something about, you know, like in the civil rights movement, you know, Martin Luther King and those guys, they picked Birmingham, Alabama. Like they knew what they were doing, and they knew that they were going to get this reaction, and that then it could be on TV, and they almost forced the American people to watch these young black men in suits and ties have fire hoses and dogs sicked on them. And even for the 1960s American person who maybe harbored like some significant degree of prejudice, even for them, just seeing that was like, oh, Jesus, like, I can't support that. Right. You know what I mean? And there is something with, you know, the U.S. has had just an insane immigration policy, really since 1965. But I mean, the Biden immigration, it was just like the most insane policy. Joe Biden seems to me like at least part of his legacy is he moved the country further right on immigration than you could have imagined. Is that super majorities of the American people support mass deportations. But just like there's a difference between being a little bit racist against black people and being able to watch, you know, cops unleash German shepherds on black dudes in suits and ties, it's one thing to kind of believe, I think the people who are here illegally got to go back. It's another thing to like watch it unfold and see what type of, and I'll just say this, like on the theme of what I was saying like earlier about the signal stuff, you know, there were so many efforts to like sabotage Donald Trump's first presidency. In this moment, if you really want to see mass deportations, which by the way, we're not saying, but if you really want to see that, as most Americans do, you finally won the argument. You finally won the day. You've now got supermajorities of the American people on your side, and you've elected a president that this is his signature issue. The last thing you would want to do is go round up 234 of them with no due process and send them to the most notorious, brutal prison in El Salvador.
And get some of them
like,
wrong.
what the fuck are you thinking?
And get some of them wrong.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you're saying there haven't been mass deportations. What do you mean by that?
I mean in large numbers. Like there have been deportations. They've already kind of slowed down, but we have tens of millions of illegal immigrants in the country.
Right, but that's not what they're looking for. What they're looking for is the criminals. And here's allegedly, right? This is what we're hoping. But here's the problem that bothers me. Quotas. I had a friend who was a cop who would tell me about quotas for speeding tickets back when they weren't supposed to tell people about that. Mm-hmm. They have quotas.
Right.
And I said, so it's basically like being a glorified revenue collector. And he's like, pretty much. If I'm not writing tickets, you know, it's going to come down on me. Like, imagine a day where everybody made a decision. Like, for the next 60 days, collectively, as a country, no one's going to violate any traffic laws. Everyone's going to stop to a complete halt at every stop sign. No one's going to go a mile an hour above the speed limit. What happens? What do these cops do? If you have quotas, so you're assuming that people will always break the law forever. And if they don't, do you adjust? Do you fire the cops? Do you cut your budget? What do?
Do you remember when this happened in New York City? It was over a decade ago. There was they had this like unofficial, official police like slowdown where they were upset about this. I can't remember the exact story, but it was the head of the police union said that he was like, we will only be enforcing like violent crimes.
It was
and we're
when
not
the
doing
stop
any of this
and
other.
frisk.
Yes, it was over the stop and frisk controversy, and they were kind of like, "Oh, you guys want to all call us racist?" Which already I thought was so hilarious. I used to have a joke in my act about this many years ago, but where it was just like that was the threat from cops. It was like, "We're only going to arrest violent criminals," and you're like, "That's probably what you should be doing to begin with." Like, what do we? And so then like all these, and everything was fine. By the way, there wasn't a rise in violent crime. It was just they just stopped doing it, but revenue started collapsing, and then they like whipped the cops into getting back to it. Like they were like threatening their pensions and shit, and they were like, "Yo, you cannot do this. You got to keep policing for profit."
Isn't that crazy? Policing for profit. It's crazy. It's crazy that they write tickets. Like tickets are kind of nuts. You know, it's like you have to give us money because you went too fast.
Well, I've always
because that's the incentive that everyone agrees is going to work. God, I got another ticket.
Yeah.
Fuck.
I always thought like
We're going to stop speeding? No, I'm going to get a radar detector.
Yeah, well, right. People find a way. I always thought there was something really unfair that I've heard some progressives talk about this, but it never seemed to like get that much traction. But there is something about like giving a ticket that's like, what it just seems so regressive in terms of like it's so much more punitive toward poor people and working class people than it is toward the and it's the same number for all of that. You know what I mean? Like there's something
Don't
about
give them
that
any
that's
ideas,
fucked
dude.
up.
They'll
No,
start
I'm not
giving
sure.
rich
I know.
people big
This
tickets.
is the way this is the problem is that progressives that will take that and go, oh, okay, so that means up it on the rich people. It's like, no, that's not what I'm saying.
Tax the rich.
But like, you know, you hand out a $75 ticket to somebody who's making like $400 a week, and you're like, Jesus Christ, dude, like that is devastating to that person.
Yeah.
Whereas like you hand out a $75 ticket to like a rich person, it's kind of like, okay,
yeah,
you know, that's a reasonable punishment for that. I mean, you know, anyway, listen, I'm not advocating like I'm not a leftist. I don't care about equity.
It is,
but
no, that's not a good idea. But it is a strange thing that there are revenue collectors who are also peace officers. Like, it seems like that should be a completely different thing.
Yeah.
It seems like cops shouldn't be pulling people over because your fucking taillight's out. That seems silly. That seems like a totally different proposition.
Yep. Yeah, no, I completely
The problem
agree.
is they pull people over for doing stupid shit, and a large percent of them are carrying drugs. A lot of them have fucking bricks in the back of their car. That's the craziest thing about guys who are trafficking drugs. They're trafficking like fucking 30 pounds of fentanyl, and they get pulled over for speeding.
For some speeding thing. Yeah, or something like that. Oh, dude.
They're coked up, and they're fucking driving fast, and they got a trunk full of fucking illegal guns and cocaine and meth. And why aren't you going so slow and cautious? Why aren't you using your blinker? You should be listening to country music on your radio.
Dude, you got meth to get somewhere.
You should have a fucking Cat Diesel hat on. You should be nice and calm and slow. You're a regular guy just going about your day.
Well, by definition, these people aren't making the wisest decisions, probably.
So you get to drive your fucking car filled with meth. You got to get it crazy, dude.
It's not as easy as you'd think. You really gotta. You can't just put a Craigslist ad up or whatever.
Right.
Like, I'm sure you got to go through some sketchy channels
and
to
now
get there.
This Tom Homan guy sending everybody across the border, you can't even get the Mexicans to do it anymore.
Oh, Jesus. I mean, that guy is. It is funny where like I get where he's kind of like the guy you'd want if you're like we need a hard ass in here to do this. But when you do start getting these concerns about due process, I mean, his response, it was in some interview where they were asking him about due process for the people he's deporting, and he's like, what's the girl?
Where was the good due process for Lake and Riley?
For Lake and Riley, where was the due process for her? And you're like, yeah, but dude, that's not what due process means.
Well, you gotta be sure.
Obviously, murder victims don't get due process. That's why it's illegal to murder somebody. And even, by the way, in that case, her killer got due process and then got convicted of murder. You know what I mean? Like, that's the whole point. And there's just, again, like I was saying, it seems there's a few moves that the Trump administration has made so far, and I don't know who is in his ear and who has convinced him to pursue this policy. But like, again, if you wanted to pursue like mass deportations, which I understand, I think there's a strong case. I mean, look, he's done a great job of stopping the flow, which was job number one. And that was his best line at his State of the Union, where it was like the Democrats kept saying we needed legislation to close the border. Turns out we just needed a new president, which is shockingly true. Like, it is unbelievable how it went from record high border crossings under Biden to record low border crossings over Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I do think that so much of that is just that it's a real difficult journey. And if people feel like, oh, Trump's in there, obviously we're not going to be allowed in, then they just won't go through it. I also do think that Donald Trump is fundamentally correct with his idea that, like, you don't have a nation if you don't have borders. Like, you can't listen. The idea, at least, I'm not saying this is really how it works, but the idea is that we're a free country because we have self-government, and in other words, the American people get to decide how many people we bring in here and how many we don't. And that it's at this point, nobody actually knows the number for sure, but it is north of 30 million illegal immigrants in the country. But my God, if you wanted to start deporting people who are legal residents, who are not violent criminals, because they wrote a pro-Palestinian op-ed, you're diving into the most contentious issue and then picking one side of that. And then, like, this just seems like it's almost as if you're trying to poison the possibility to ever really have mass deportations. It just seems so counterproductive by his own stated goals. And
well, there's so many layers of it that are hard to unpack for the average person. What's really hard to unpack, especially for like tried and true blue no matter who Democrats, is this idea that they were bringing people into this country, moving them into swing states, getting them on Social Security, giving them money and incentives and all sorts of government programs that would get them eventually to be voters.
Yeah.
And these voters would vote for that party, and you'd have a unit-party. So in that sense, that's the big one that a lot of people that are left-wing people have a really hard time swallowing. They don't believe that's true. And they'll take it, well, what about when Texas sent those people up to New York? You know, the governor of Texas sent people to New York, right. But do you know that New York's not a swing state? Yeah, he did that. But why did he do that? He did that as a big fuck you to New York for the government to turning a blind eye to the problem at the border and saying, okay, you think this isn't a problem? I'm going to send this problem to you.
It was to
you have a
expose their
sanctuary
hypocrisy.
state?
Yeah.
You have a sanctuary city? Oh, that's cute. I'll send you thousands and thousands of people that you're going to have to take care of now. And they did. And then that's even weirder because then they took over fucking luxury hotels and they had to deal with it. I think Pakistan owns one of those hotels.
Oh, is that?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Who owns the big one that was in that fucking Jennifer Lopez movie where she was a hot maid? Remember that movie? Made in Manhattan.
I never saw it, but I vaguely remember.
I watched it recently with my family. It's the most ridiculous thing. She's a 10. And she's just like this poor little sad maid. Pakistan International Airlines has owned the structure. They own the Roosevelt. So the Roosevelt's an iconic hotel in New York City, and they get paid by the federal government, or they did get paid by the federal government to house immigrants there. And they give them food, and they give them money. They give them, and like, what are you doing? Like, if you're allowing these people to vote in regional elections, okay, you've essentially now, you've bought regional elections, and if you want them to eventually become United States citizens and give them a pathway to citizenship, which all good people would want, Dave Smith, okay, now you have voters. And if you do that en masse, which they did, they brought people in this, they invited people, helped people. The Red Cross was like giving them maps, like this is how you do it. They had stops along the way where you give them water and you walk right through, and everybody just gets to be on a bus and you get shipped off to swing states. That literally happened. And people on the left do not want to address it. They want to deny it. It was an attempt to take over.
Yeah, and look, I'll say I know this because I'm like, this is, I guess, that one of the benefits of like getting older and paying attention to this shit is like I can remember shit from 15, 20 years ago. Like I was paying attention then. And I remember all of them admitting this was their plan.
Yeah.
Like literally all of the Joy Reid and Rachel Maddow and all, they used to call it the Browning of America. And they used to openly brag about how the Democrat will have super permanent majorities forever. Because look like, hey, you old dying white Republicans, like, sorry, that's it for you, because the Latinos vote overwhelmingly for Democrat, and we're going to be a majority minority country, and then a majority Hispanic country, and then the Democrats rule the day forever. So this is just, you know, Mitt Romney or whoever's running for president right now, this is the dying throes of the end of a... But then, when people started objecting to that policy, and they called it the browning of America, and then when people objected to it, they would call it the Great Replacement or whatever, and then they'd go, you're not allowed to say that. That means you're a Nazi. And you're like, but I just heard you saying it. Like 5 years ago, I heard you saying
You can't
this.
use the term replacement
Yeah,
theory.
so there was this weird, and then there was also the, one of the other big tells of this was the way they attempted, which really failed, but the way they attempted to make voter ID like a toxic racist policy, which was so, I mean, the logic of it just collapses on itself, because if it's, first of all, it seems like some bigotry of low expectations to imply that black people are like, just can't figure out how to get ID.
Do you remember Kathy Hochul saying that they don't know what computers are?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Do you remember that video?
That is the craziest.
I think you sent
First
me
of
it.
all,
The guy-
every fucking human being has a computer in their pocket.
Dude, what was the black dude who made that video? It was the funniest guy. I think you sent it to me. But he was like, there was like a computer, and he comes in, he's like dancing around it, and he's like trying to bite it and stuff too. It was so goddamn funny. Where you're like, that's literally what you're saying. Like, I don't know.
And it's like spliced, on the left side of it is her explaining that black people
He's
don't
like
know.
looking at
These
it like
black
it's all
inner city kids, they don't know what a computer is.
Well, but then, I mean, like, just like using the most basic logic, you'd be like, okay, wait a minute, but like, so if requiring ID is racist, then like we got some other really big problems in this country that we should be looking at. Like,
Well,
that.
not only that, but it's in the direct memory, the recent memory of everybody needing ID because you had to prove that you got the COVID vaccine.
Right, yeah. Which then, and then that was fine. Somehow that, and when that, by the way, disproportionately affected minorities. No progressive seemed to care about that.
No
that
one
it was
cared.
overwhelmingly black people, wildly disproportionately black people, and immigrants who just refused the vaccine. By the way, let the record show they were smarter than everybody else for doing it.
You know who else?
Me and you.
PhDs.
Oh yeah. That is an interesting detail, isn't it?
Overwhelmingly skeptical about this new vaccine.
And here, me and you got called out by Anthony Fauci and Joe Biden for fucking being right, for being absolutely right. I mean, it's so wild too that was only 3 years ago or 4 years ago when you said that your advice to young people was to just be really healthy, and that was like a national controversy. That you just like, you just think about how upside down
it was.
Everything
Also
is.
people doing the man's job for the man. It was everybody piled on, everybody, and especially once you got the shot yourself, you're like, I did the right thing because you knew it was risky. You fucking know
on
it's
some
risky.
level too.
Absolutely, it's medication. Anytime you get medication, you know it's risky. Anytime you get some pharmaceutical drug in your system, not to mention some completely novel new way where it turns your entire body into a vaccine or an immunity-producing spike protein factory. By the way, which is the most toxic aspect of getting the disease, is the spike protein, so your body's going to produce it itself. What?
Yeah.
PhDs were like, I don't know.
And it was also way past the point where we had already figured out that, like, if you weren't very old and very sick, this was, you statistically had almost no chance of like a serious
even more
negative
importantly,
outcome.
we had very long ago realized it wasn't a threat at all to kids.
Yep.
So there was no justification whatsoever to force kids to get vaccinated, and yet we did it. And California did it. They did it to schools. They did it everywhere. And the fact that they pulled that off, and then a couple of years later, they're like, you don't need ID to vote?
Yeah.
Why do you need ID to vote? That's racist. In California, you're not allowed to show ID. You're not allowed to show ID.
So, like, come on. I mean, listen, obviously this is, and like, there's a reason for all of this. It's not, they didn't just pick showing your ID voting and decide to make this the issue that they harped on and tried to pretend you were somehow racist or you were somehow infringing on voting rights by requiring an ID. And so, look, like, this did, a couple things happened. Number one, it totally turned public opinion against this level of crazy immigration. And number two, I mean, Donald Trump ended up winning